Awesome. Wonderful. Oh, okay. We got some visitors. Do we get to?
Oh, we have an audience?
It's funny. Okay, they're gone. Okay, great. Thank you so much, Susie, for being here, for being a guest speaker at our podcast here at Crown and Chakra. So everybody, today we have Susie Adra. She's an incredible teacher, and I recently participated in one of her yoga classes or courses. So what I would say is I have never experienced being in that state of awake awareness until I participated in her morning class. And I felt like I ventured into a portal in a different reality, and that was just a really beautiful experience. I wanted to share what she knows and what I have experienced in this podcast episode. And today we're going to be talking about what it means to be your highly embodied self. So just to tell you a little bit about Susie, she is a talented artist, a teacher of transformation, and a pioneer in the somatic trauma release world. She is an incredible yoga teacher, and she is going to share her wisdom and knowledge about what it means to be your highly embodied self and spark that creativity within you. Welcome, Susie. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Kat. That's a beautiful introduction.
Thanks. So I wanted to ask you, what prompted you to pursue yoga in the first place? And maybe you could talk a little bit about your background, your journey, and how you became a teacher of this type of work.
Wow.
Kind of a big question.
How much time do I have to fit in like 20 years worth of history? But I'll try to be really brief.
Okay.
I grew up actually partially in the Far East. I've always known about yoga.
Mm-hmm.
I just never really practiced it when I was younger.
Mm-hmm.
And then about a year before I got pregnant with my son, I decided to fill up my time with something, and it happened to be yoga. I found a book at a local bookstore, and it was the Sivananda guide to yoga, and it just prescribed different postures that you can do, and you just kind of evolved your practice through that. So I kind of started out as a self-taught student of yoga, and after I had my kids, I was like so in love with yoga that I decided to go and get certified.
Oh,
so
wow.
I went to yoga school locally here in Michigan.
Mm-hmm.
And taking really intense yoga classes, so mostly Ashtanga, high cardio, high impact.
Yeah.
That was like more of a workout kind of mainstream, all that good stuff. It was good for a while. I mean, I enjoyed it. I always had a lot of students, and it was a good experience to have. Mm-hmm. But then in 2008, I got diagnosed with osteoarthritis in my neck. Mm. And I began questioning everything. Like, how does this even qualify me to teach yoga? It took me a while to get out of that, days on end of just sitting on the couch, just in shock. Like, how could this happen to me? I'm not qualified to teach. Teachers don't have spine problems. They don't have issues like these. It was
I think that's
a huge learning experience for sure.
Yeah.
And then I experienced something shortly after as I was painting, because I'm an artist. Mm-hmm. I could feel energies like moving through me as I was painting. And so that kind of made me want to go back to school and understand what this is that I'm experiencing. For me, it felt like it was somewhat related to my yoga path or the spiritual path, and I started like relating creative process to spiritual process. So several years later, I did write a dissertation on that, and I came to understand that, the body is not just what we see, the human body. There's more to that. It's like a mystery. And no matter how much we try to understand it, there's always going to be things that we really don't get. But what helped me really get in touch with the somatic element was that I did a training with Mariana Kaplan. I'm not sure if you're familiar with her writings. I highly recommend picking up some of her books. She does trainings where she brings in the psychological aspect with the yoga. So you're really feeling your body as you're working through your postures, but also to the point where you're sensing where the emotions are in your body that are coming up. So you're not checking out and like daydreaming about what you're going to be doing today, and it's just a practice that we're just going to do yoga now and do a few handstands and get on with our day. No, it's about really like doing the work that you need to, like self-inquiry basically as you're doing yoga. So that felt like my path. It felt like I found what I wanted to do. And coming from a country where there was a huge civil war for many years, I grew up with a bunch of traumatic experiences that stayed with me for a while, and I experienced a lot of PTSD, and I wouldn't say that I'm completely healed at this point, but I'm so much in a much better place than I was before, and thanks to yoga and tuning in with my body. But also I did an Ayurvedic training around the same time. And through Ayurveda, I learned that the body, not the body, but the etheric body, if you will, the subtle body of a human is connected to the physical body through the marma points, or the plural is marmani. And it's the same concept as they have in Chinese medicine.
Yeah.
So
meridians, is that very similar to the
meridians? It's not just meridians. It's through these meridians, the channels, there are certain specific points in the body. And I believe in Ayurveda, there's 117 of them. And targeting these points in the body is what helps unblock certain energies that get stuck there. And the reason these energies get stuck is because of unexpressed emotions. And if you think about a human being throughout their day, they're experiencing so many emotions that they're not actually expressing. And so these get suppressed in the system and cause all kinds of, diseases eventually if they're not addressed. And so yoga, what yoga is designed to do is to release these pockets of tension. And no matter what kind of flow you do, you're always sort of targeting all of them at the same time. But the key is to not check out. It's to stay with what you're experiencing, to stay with that. And I sort of wove that eventually into the way I teach, is that I wanted people to just stay with their breath and stay with the body no matter what. So I keep bringing people back into that.
Yeah, I remember you talking about that in the class too. And I think the first time that I heard it, I was I thought it was like, oh, that's an interesting phrase, but I wasn't familiar with that. And I'm a student of psychology, so this is very fascinating to me, and how there's new research that's being done in the field of psychology with learning what trauma is and what happens. And I myself, like my family, has experienced, at least generationally, war as well in a different country, and there's a lot of research being done with epigenetics and how trauma can be intergenerationally passed and linked. And so my experience when you said something like that, it's like there is that feeling that arises in the body, but we're socially conditioned in American culture, at least, is to suppress that feeling and kind of bury it down somewhere else. And when I heard that phrase, I was thinking, stay with that feeling, and it's really uncomfortable. But also the encouragement that you were giving to everybody in the class was just really nice and loving at the same time. It wasn't like stay with the uncomfortable part and go into it. It wasn't like diving deep into it. It was just very gentle. And I really liked that, and I appreciated how you approached it, because it's not something that I had experienced in a yoga class before. And I'm a yoga teacher as well, but not in that way. I was trained in hatha yoga. So hatha yoga is like super, like flex the body and push it this way and do some inversions and go upside down. It's very aggressive to the body. And what I'm learning now is how to balance some of these things in my life. And it can't just be forward energy all the time, because we already have so much masculine forward energy floating around in the world. And we need the other part where we just recognize what's going on in the body and be with it. So I love that you're talking about this kind of work, because this is the exploration that we have to do in this new paradigm that we're bringing out into the world, because that is the work, right? Like that is the work as a human being.
Absolutely. That's why we do yoga.
Yeah.
And, I have to say too that the marma or the marmani, they're connected to the mind. They're actually connected to the mind through the channels that run through the body. So that's how you could bridge that with the psychological aspect, because these channels are not just there for fun, like they're not created just for fun. They're actually channeling things. They're channeling energy. And what's in the mind? It's energy.
How did you studied Ayurveda and yoga. How did you weave that into bringing out creativity within someone in that space? Because I'm a creative person, and I feel like for many years I've gone too far into my analytical mind, and I have a very scientific background. So I'm just starting to learn how to deprogram myself. And I know a lot of people are too, after either transitioning from one mental space, and then they've discovered like, oh, I have this other part of my brain that I have not used in a while, or I've just kind of suppressed for a while. What have you seen with people from your practice with this kind of work?
Yeah, so mostly creativity has like many faces. Like from my research, I've come to find that there are infinite processes of creative. Creativity can be infinite. There's no limited amount. Right. And the same goes for spiritual experience. It's infinite. So that's like a huge overlap right there, which has me thinking that creative process is also a spiritual path. But from my experience, it's when I begin to create, it's sort of like meditation. I'm able to focus more. And it could be different for everyone else. Some people might go into the analytical mind, like you said. But for me, I try to encourage people to get into a childlike place where there's nothing to really worry about. Like just make whatever marks you want on the canvas and just make it playful. Don't worry about what it looks like. Just appreciate the process that you're going through, because this is helping you release some of the energies. It's it's a process too that allows for greater integration.
Mm-hmm. How do you, I guess for me, and for a lot of people that are, working a typical 9 to 5 job, they're constantly thinking, they're constantly trying to solve the problems of the world, or just whatever, just solving something. And I think that's the part of our mental faculty that keeps looking for things to do. What would you say to those people that have a hard time turning that part of their brains off with the yoga practice? And is there some kind of a special thing that you do with the breathing or the releasing the tension?
All these things are important. I would say find a good teacher, find a good guide, basically someone who always bring you back to your breath, always bring you back into your body, and get you out of the mind. It takes a little bit of that initially, and then once you practice over time, it just becomes second nature. You're automatically there. It doesn't take too much after that. But I mean, there are certain things that you can do on your own, but you'd have to stick with them too. It's not like I'm just going to breathe today and then skip another week and then breathe for a few minutes next week. It's a practice. So you'll have to maybe breathe 5 minutes a day and then increase it. Mm-hmm. Sort of like the book that I started out, the Sivananda into yoga, where you add a pose every week and you just keep practicing the poses you learn, but you add something and you just keep building from there. It's a growth.
Yeah, it's kind of like the minute changes, right? You can't make the mental change and emotional change happen if you don't practice the actual thing. It's kind of like a muscle where you're moving one thing over another. I had this image when you were describing that to me. I don't know if you've ever played archery before, or it's like just when you have one thing that you're focusing on, which is the I don't know, it's like a dartboard almost. Like an aim that you're trying to go to is like you're focusing on it. But if you move ever so slightly in one way, just like an inch or like half an inch or like even just like a little slight part of it, the arrow would like either miss or you would go. So it's just like the little tiny changes that you could do for each time you practice. And I find that with myself too, when I'm doing my own personal practice in the morning, I would just add, one more thing here, like just push myself a little bit extra and be uncomfortable with it. And but at the same time, the awareness that happens between that space, I think that's the biggest thing, is just paying attention to that. And I know a lot of yoga teachers that get into the super hyper cardio version of this that have veered away from tapping into that space, and maybe they do hold on to that ever so slightly, but I like diving deep into that space even more because it's introspective, but also it gives a greater meaning to what you're doing instead of just going about it. And I'm just gonna hold this pose, I'm gonna hold the boat pose for 5 more seconds. Right?
Yeah, it's nice to feel the physical aspects of it. So like when you're holding boat pose, drop into how you're feeling emotionally, or like follow that feeling that's coming up, the uncomfortable feeling sometimes that's there, and just be aware of it. You don't really have to do anything with it. Just being aware of it is what helps you eventually resolve it. Because when you practice boat pose every day and you come to that same feeling, you start to understand it from like an inner knowing. No one has to actually tell you what it is that you need to do with it. It just sort of unravels itself.
That's a really good point to say. It's just sort of unravels itself, because a lot of times I try to put words into it, and there's not really any appropriate word that could comprehend what's happening while you're in that space. It's very, I would like to say that I'm going to make an attempt of describing it. I would like to say that maybe it's just like a different language in itself that happens.
Yeah, of course.
Because it's energy, right? It's like energy that's trapped. For those that are listening, how would you say that, let's say they're listening to this while they're driving, or they're listening to this while they're taking a break, or I don't know, just going about their day. What would you say for them to recognize if there's some kind of tension that is in their body, or well, how would they recognize that if they're just kind of going out and about, and like where would the awareness be in order for them to get back in their body if they're just kind of going out and about in their day?
I would say if they have the ability to find somewhere silent, just be on their own for like 5 minutes, not even more, and just drop into their body. So closing their eyes if they can, and just feel what is coming up, and just whatever it is that's there, they don't have to try to change it or understand it, just being with it for that duration, and then sort of thank it and keep going with their day.
It sounds so simple.
I think that if one was able to do this every day for 5 minutes, they will see huge results. Just saying.
Yeah, just saying. Well, I know for me, when I experienced that in the class, I mean, obviously it's a little bit more involved, but I'll just share. It was just such a beautiful experience. I remember just laying there, breathing and being one with my breath. And I was just like in that space altogether, and being able to hold that kind of awareness throughout the rest of the day. It was just a really beautiful experience. And I thought, wow, anyone can do this. This is like, why are we not teaching this a little bit more into the world? And like, Susie's doing this. How is she doing this? So yeah, it's just really incredible the way that you bring people into that space. And the concept is very simple, but in practice, if I just sit there, I remember the time when I was working in corporate, and I wasn't able to sit by myself for more than 3 minutes, because there's a lot of things that I would think about. I would think about, oh, I gotta send this proposal, or I gotta do something. There's the dishes, or like there's a lot of things that need to be completed in the 5 minutes that I'm sitting here doing nothing. This is silly. Like all these things like would come up. And I think the trick is just to be okay with that and sit with it, and you don't have to do anything.
Well, it's also about prioritizing yourself, prioritizing self-care over what it is that I need to get done, basically.
Yeah, so let's talk more about that.
I'm more important than all these things, because if I'm not well, nothing's going to get done.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad that you're saying this, because I really feel that as women, we tend to put other things first instead of us first. And I think this is a very important conversation that we need to have now, especially in this day and age, because there's an acceleration point of all the things that we need to do. Not only that, I also have to play multiple roles in my life, but where do I put myself in this space first? And I think this is the biggest work that we have to do in Earth School. I like to call it Earth School, because it is a place that we learn, but we can't give to others unless we first learn who we really are, how to take care of ourselves, and how to be in a very good state of emotional state, a mental state, physical state, and spiritual state. And if all those things are aligned, then we can be the embodiment of our most highest creative divine feminine self, right? So I think that's a very important thing to bring out into the world, because it's needed now more than ever. The self-care piece.
Yeah. I mean, I'm also speaking not just for women, you know, for everyone,
For
everyone, no matter what it is they
I agree.
do in the world, it's important.
Yeah. Yeah, and then the other thing too is, you know, there's this idea in the world now that even in, especially I've seen this too in the personal development space, where you have to grind and keep going and just push for beyond what the body could be capable of, and just forget about like how you really feel. Just stay up until 3 a.m. and get up 4 hours later, 5 a.m. You know, it's like, it's silly. And it's become a generally accepted practice, especially if you're in the tech space or in that world. It's like you got to make things happen to the point of exhaustion, and you could just maybe make up for it if you do other things. And I think that the most important part is like how to prioritize, exactly what you said earlier, is prioritizing the self first instead of the act of doing in accomplishing something, because a lot of people are wanting to attain some kind of a goal in somewhere, someplace, sometime, somewhere else, but it's not here. You're not really being present into the moment of what's going on.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From experience, I mean, it's easier to just tune into yourself and know what you need in any given moment than to just spend your energy not really knowing what it is that you're needing in that time. But also, it seems that when you're younger, you can get away with that. You can get away with, you know, spending all the energy and all the different things and leaving yourself last. You'll still be able to function the next morning.
Right.
But it's going to catch up to you at some point. And that's when you're going to be questioning whether this is worth it or not. And,
well,
you know, how do I make more me time, basically?
Yeah. Well, here's the thing that I'm noticing that's kind of a disturbing trend that I'm noticing with a lot of young people in their 20s now, is that they are doing that to themselves, and they're traveling quite so much, and they're pushing themselves to the point that, yeah, I'm young, I have all this energy, I got to expend it, I can do this. But a lot of them are coming to me asking questions like, I feel like I didn't realize this is what I was doing to my body. I didn't know this is what I was doing. And now it's like, and it's in that space where a conversation can happen with, oh, then you need more sleep, then you need more time to balance it out, then you need more time to really just take it easy and prioritize yourself and put yourself first, instead of thinking about work and money. And all those things are important too in life, but it's just a matter of keeping it in balance and not going ham on a lot of these things. And a lot of them ask me these questions of, how are you doing this? How are you balancing things out? How are you at this point and stage in your life being able to stay healthy, but also maintain the kind of work that you're doing? So, and they ask me these questions, and I'm like, I don't know. I'm just being here. And I listen to what really needs to be paid attention to, and prioritize that. And it could be shifting too. And for me, I like to honor the cycle of waxing and waning energies, because that is following that. You can't always be doing something and then not having the time to rest.
Yeah. The rest is really important. It's more important than working.
Yes.
Honestly, like, that's how I'm able to function, is by resting. And people will never believe how much of a break I always get, and how much I give permission to myself to have breaks in my day. And that's what allows me to get things done.
Yeah, let me ask you this question, because I think this is where most people get tripped up, is allowing themselves to have that permission for themselves to do it. Like, how have you been able to give yourself permission to do that? Because for a lot of people that are so used to doing something or responding to something, it's almost like there's this weird thing that happens between the internal conversation and what they know they need to do to allow themselves to be permitted to do nothing or rest or to just do some self-care.
I think it has to be experienced for it to click. And I think that's how it happened for me. Because I remember when I was, and this just happened recently, like within the past 3 years. Before, I used to be like a really like multitasker, doing 20 million things at a time. Because I'm a mom. But and I was writing my dissertation. But as I was writing it, there were moments where I was like, I just want this thing to just be done. I just want it to be done so that I can move on and do other things. And in that place, I would have like dry spells where I couldn't really get much done. And I would just sit there and be, okay, like there's nothing coming. I don't know where to go from here. So I have to just be with it and accept it. And I think that experience, because I saw that the more I sort of let go and just let it happen on its own, the more stuff would come up, or like ideas and insights and things that were like sort of hidden before, when I was trying to like grasp for more information, more answers. And once I just let it be and just kind of gave the dissertation control, it just happened. It just wrote itself, basically. And then when I saw that that's the process, that's how you get things done, it sort of clicked for me. And that's what I use now. It's like, oh, I want to write this blog, but I really don't know where to go with it. So I'm like, at least I have the idea, and I'll just see where that goes. And I'll just like forget it for a day or two. And then before you know it, it writes itself. So I think that can be applied to anything. Try not to like grasp at the answers and just let them come. I don't know if it's making sense.
It makes sense, because I've gotten in a point now, I'm in graduate school, so I've gotten in a place now where I'm okay if there's nothing happening for me. There's no inspiration for me to engage in something if I don't quite, either one, I don't understand myself, or I don't really know what I'm going to be writing about, so I just leave it alone. And then there's the other thing that happens too when I try to write something, is my logical mind wants to take over and sound fancy about certain things, and then it tries to put a formula on it. And then I think about it a little bit. It's like, oh, is it grammatically correct, or is it even that? And then I'm just thinking about it for a while. I did this actually a couple weeks ago, and I was just really hard on myself, like thinking about this, like, what am I going to write about this thing? I don't know. But I left it alone. I didn't engage with it. I just kind of allowed it to happen. And it was kind of annoying, Susie. I was so annoyed with myself in this process. I was just like walking around, like, maybe I just took a walk or something, like, whatever. I'm just going to leave it alone. And I'm like, it doesn't sound like it's my authentic self, like wanting to come out. It's like my intellectual woo-woo side, whatever, that's just like wanting to write itself on the paper. But that's not my voice. That's not really me. That's not my creative side. So I'm just gonna not forget about it. And the next day, I just did my own self-practice, did yoga, and like walked outside, connected with nature. I think that's like the key for me, is just to like bond with nature. I put my feet in the grass, and I just sat with it, and as soon as I did that, I'm like relaxed completely. My body's like totally relaxed. I was open energetically and physically too, and just like it's just an open channel for that. Like the inspiration and the creativity just kind of bubbled up from within, and and that's when I got like that inspiration, a surge of energy to just like, oh, there's this idea, write about this. And so I didn't have anything to write with, so I just like whipped my phone out and start writing. So that's kind of how it happened for me. But I think there's something to slowing down and resting and really honing in on that part.
Yeah, it's the releasing of the tension.
Yeah.
The tension is what sort of blocks the creative process, I feel. Mm-hmm. When you find yourself in some tense places, it could be things that you're not aware of that are just coming up for some reason or the other. And once that is resolved, like you said, if you practice yoga or do some breath work or any movement really, movement, dancing, tai chi, whatever it is gonna really help.
Yeah, I like the yoga that you don't really think about anything, or any kind of movement activity where you don't think too much. Because I remember taking salsa and bachata dance classes, and I was still thinking about like, oh, I got to turn my body this way. I got to, like 1, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. I'm still thinking, I'm gonna get to a point where I'm like not thinking about that.
My favorite.
Yeah.
I like watching people dancing salsa, but I can't just get into that. I like the flowy stuff. Just do what your body needs is what I say. And I don't know if you noticed when I was teaching the class that you were in that I actually always give permission for students to just move however the body needs to move.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you how you need to move on a certain day. Mm-hmm. So this is kind of like, in a way, it's a kriya, that's whatever is coming up in your system that needs to be moved. And only you can know that. And there's no way for you to know it if you're not in tune with your body.
Yeah, I agree that's so important. I think that's the part and I love that you talked about that, because it's the permission part. It's like, it's almost like we have to allow ourselves to give ourselves permission to just move the way that it wants to move, the energy, and not get in that mental state of like, I have this image of how I'm gonna move, right? Like, oh, it's not as flowy as I want it to be. Like, forget about that idea. It's a silly thing. And who put that there anyway? That was whose thought is that? But it's just a false idea that's been conditioned and programmed. So I think it's just allowing ourselves to be okay with the natural rhythm, the flow of how we could listen to the body in our own way.
Yeah. And yoga poses are never about what they look or what you look like when you're practicing. It's about how you're feeling when you're practicing.
Yes, that's
what's important. And I think in yoga classes we tend to lose that. That knowing that it doesn't really matter what it looks like. Not all bodies are the same. Nobody's going to be doing the same stretch. It's going to look different on every single human being. But as long as they're feeling that stretch and they're able to like breathe through it and feel like a release and feel comforted in that, then that's what's needed. That's what is, that's what yoga is.
Yeah, I think that's the purpose of yoga. And I love that you're talking about this, because we live in Instagram age now, and there's a lot of yoga teachers out there, and they're just like, I'm going to strike this pose, and I'm going to go to the Grand Canyon and like pose on the edge of the freaking canyon. And it's like, what are we doing? This has been some kind of weird fad of popularity, something. I don't know. It's morphed into that. It's weird.
It's definitely taking yoga out of its original context and doing something completely different with it.
Mm-hmm.
Because, you know, yoga is for preparing the body and the mind to be able to sit in meditation for long periods of time, to reach that transcendent place, to actually be in touch with your inner self, with your self with a capital S.
Yes.
It's not about Instagram.
No, it's not about Instagram. There's so many. Yeah,
Although
I tell you,
I have posted a few videos of me doing yoga just to, you know, to give myself credentials that I actually know how to do yoga, because otherwise people are like, how do you say you're a yoga teacher when we've never seen you do yoga before?
Yeah, I feel like that whole world of physical aspect of it is morphed into this other, I don't even know what to call it, another picturesque thing of the idea. It's more of an idea than the actual practice. And a lot of, for myself anyway, like there's a lot of emphasis that's being placed on this, especially now with women in younger, and not men too, that it just yoga teachers in general that want to do certain poses. Like, I'm going to pose this way for acro yoga. That's another thing, you know. Is it really getting to that place? And maybe it works for some people.
It's I mean, on a human level, it's more like of the physical aspect. Yoga originally, why it came about is it's more esoteric. It's a mystical path. It's a spiritual path. It's not about the physical. You work on the physical to get to the other place, so that's where you start, but it's not really, that's not what it is about. But we as humans are really good at making things more materialistic, so I think that's the answer to Instagram.
That's very true. Well, one more question for you, Susie. How would you, what is one wisdom or advice that you could tell to our listeners on how to help them to stop getting ready, to be ready with what it is that they want to create in the world?
Well, that goes back to the conversation we just had, you know. If you're not prioritizing your self-care, I don't think you'll ever be ready to create whatever it is that you want in the world. So, you know, taking care of yourself is a priority to be able to give back to the world what it is that you want to give back.
That's beautiful. It's kind of like that idea of putting your own oxygen mask first.
Exactly.
do that for other people. Yeah.
Because if you're not in a space where you're clear, like, you can still have stuff coming up on a daily basis, but you know how to handle it. So you just, you know, schedule some time maybe to work on that, and then you'll have more resources and more energy.
Yeah, I think that's becoming more important, especially people that are stepping into their leadership and being in that space where the demand for your time and your energy is so much more. And even just like one little thing could derail like the rest of the day. So I think the discernment part on where I am energetically wise and how centered am I, where am I specifically with my own awareness, and how much can I share. But first, where am I? Like, that always comes first. Like, where am I in all these pieces before I could engage with other people?
Yeah, it's knowing your capacity basically, and also, you know, it's about boundaries and knowing when to say no to stuff.
That's so important. Yeah.
You know, like, you could be handed an amazing project. But if you feel like there's something there that's just not clicking, maybe it's better to just hold off and not do it.
Yeah. Yeah, I agree. I like having this rule where if I'm making a decision about something that's aligned with me, it'll just be there. It'll just happen and there's no question about it. But if I spend any more than 10 seconds thinking about whether I'm going to do it, or I apply this too with shopping. It's a great technique if you're going somewhere. If I stand there at a place and I'm staring at it for more than 10 seconds, I am not going to buy it.
It's not meant to be.
It's not meant to be. I'm not excited enough for this. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I guess there's a factor of like actually dropping into your intuition and your gut feeling about stuff. So
yeah. Oh, that again.
Really knowing like right away, is this for me or is this not for me?
Yeah. Oh, I have a question for you that had just come up right now, because this came up the other day when I was in conversation with a friend, and I was asked, how do I know how to feel into the intuition part of myself and if it's right or not? And I kind of had an explanation about this and how I experience intuition, but I'm curious to find out more about what you're doing to feel into the intuition and listen into when that happens.
Basically, it's like you said, it's the first thing that comes to your mind.
Okay.
That's your intuition. And then once you get into like the talk, like, oh yes, no, maybe that's not intuition. But the first feeling or the first answer that comes to your mind, that would be your intuition.
Is it?
But
yeah.
What we do is we question it. We always question it.
Yeah.
We're sort of programmed to question that.
Right. I guess my programming, here's my programming coming out. Wouldn't it seem like it's kind of impulsive to do something like that? Or
to go with the gut feeling? To go with the first answer?
Yeah. That's why I prefaced it and like, here's my programming coming out, because it kind of feels like it is like there, right? Like, yeah, I think I just caught myself in that one, so I don't know.
I wouldn't say it's impulsive, but the key too is to know if it's for you or not.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
So like there are two things here.
Yeah.
I tend to be intuitive by birth, I guess, like it's part of who I am. So I use that when I do metaphysical anatomy technique, which is a trauma resolving modality. And sometimes I'll pick up on like things intuitively. Like it'll just be like, oh, like that's what it is. So I don't really know that it would be impulsive. I think there are ways to get in touch with it. And I actually have like this meditation that I do, and I've actually shared it with some people. I think I have it recorded too. It's not the greatest recording, but it's a way to drop into your gut. So like your womb center. That's where you get the intuition. Believe it or not, it's not in your head.
Yeah.
It's in your gut. Like that's why we say it's a gut feeling, right?
It is a gut feeling, yeah. And that's how I understand it. For me, it's almost like a knowing. It's not like an intellectual thing. It's not like an impulsive thing where I question myself. It's more or less like, oh, I feel it in my core being of where I am, kind of like that umbilical cord part, like that area of like your belly button in that center. But it's not like a wanting of something. It's more of a, you just know. It's like, oh, it's this one. I'm like, okay, that's solid. It feels solid for me.
So it won't, like if it's impulsive, chances are that there was some mind involved. There was some mind chatter, like a back and forth, some sort of a conversation, and then it becomes impulsive.
Yeah.
But intuition is never impulsive.
Yeah.
Or maybe it is. I don't know.
I don't think it's impulsive. Because if you know that's where it feels the best for you and everybody else, then it's not really in the mental mind. It's not off. It feels centered and grounded and in your core.
Exactly. It's a gut feeling. It's more on an energetic level.
Yeah. Well, how can people reach you if they want to learn more about somatics and the yoga that you're teaching? And do you have a class that you're going to be teaching sometime in the West Coast? Because I'm going to be there in the next week.
Unfortunately, no. I actually live in the East Coast, so I'm in Michigan. I do have a retreat that I want to do in the Upper Peninsula in the spring.
Oh, nice.
And I just bought a space in Italy, out of all places.
Oh, beautiful.
And I'm renovating it now. It's in the process of renovation, and it hopefully should be ready for the public by next summer, I'm hoping, if all goes well. And I'll definitely be doing some yoga retreats there. Hey, I'm happy to come out to the West Coast and do some special yoga workshops if people are interested.
Yes, that would be incredible. If you could.
I'm reachable through my website. I'm almost on every single social media out there. So it's not that hard to find me. I'm also on LinkedIn. There are many ways you can reach me, and email, it works fine too. So
all right. And I can put the links to from your website and
sure,
in the show notes. So wow, thank you for being a part of the Crown and Chakra community at the Bright Phoenix, Susie, and I am so grateful for the work that you're sharing with the world and the wisdom that you're imparting with everybody that's listening to this podcast right now. And I just am so blessed to have you be a part of the community, because I feel like it's so incredible with what you're doing, and it's really important for people to understand like what's going on inside first before we could step into leadership and give to other people. So thank you for being here.
Thank you for inviting me. This was a pleasure.
Yeah, absolutely.
It was nice talking to you.
Yeah, nice talking to you.